This is the best way to play Zenyatta in Overwatch 2. Orb your flankers and orb aggression as you normally would, but you need to keep moving and rotating with cover when you or the enemy team are aggressing. Be aware and keep your eyes peeled for flankers because a single shot on a Tracer, Sombra or Genji can put a lot of pressure on them. Be disciplined with your positioning, orb aggression, and always be aware of flank threats. Zen's weapon, the blue balls, make Zen fire his orbs, dealing 48 damage per shot at 120 DPS. Zen can also charge up to 5 orbs to release them all into one burst, dealing 240 damage in total, one-shotting any squishy targets. In terms of usage, there's actually quite a lot of nuance with your orbs, particularly your secondary fire. In most cases, you really want to get into the habit of only firing your orb volley when you have at least 4 orbs charged. If you're constantly firing out 1 or 2 orb volleys, you might as well be holding down left click and getting higher DPS. Charge your orbs as you approach a corner, then toss them out, and then quickly duck back into cover. Corner discipline is really important here in order to not take too much damage, but I'll get onto that later. With your primary fire, 2 main things. Firstly, when actually dueling DPS, the best piece of advice is to not panic. Essentially, you need to have good trigger discipline. Don't start tossing your shots all over the place, but rather pace yourself and adjust your crosshair to where you might think the enemy flanker will end up. Remember, 1 or 2 discorded shots will force a deflect, translocate or recall. Secondly, and this ties into your orb, you might want to consider shooting and discording different targets. Generally speaking, of course, you'll typically shoot and discord the same targets, but because of how much value landing 1 or 2 body shots is on a squishy, pressuring backline squishies or landing shots on a DPS taking an angle whilst keeping discord on the enemy tank might be a play to make.
We see something nice and juicy, we hear the tickety tickety tickety, but it just doesn't matter. Now, what you might want to do here is if you want to get really fancy, you're like, well, I want to keep that Ramattra discorded so my Ramattra wins. Okay, so then discord the Ramattra, shoot the bat. Or discord the Ramattra and shoot down here. Where you're like, you're not even trying to kill these guys, but you're just going to keep them out of the way so that your Ramattra can pummel this guy. Now, that's really, really advanced, and that's hard to do in the heat of the moment, really fast, but you can see all these micro decisions that you're doing right now. Your discord, who you're shooting, who you're harmoning, and you're doing all of them wrong. So now it's less about us shooting Sigma and more about getting the kills on the back line and surviving the Sigma pressure, then killing the Sigma afterwards. So this is the most important kill right here. Like, this has to happen. Ignore Sigma. We're going in.
Remember this. Target priority comes down to who's the easiest to kill and who's the most dangerous. In that first Barlow example, a Baptiste with the Matrix is both an easy and dangerous target compared to a Ramattra in block. Alternatively, if there's a soldier or Cassidy flanking and they start shooting you or your team, then your target priority switches because they're more dangerous than the Baptiste in the back, as well as being easier to kill. Zen's first ability, the most broken ability in the game, makes Zen choose any enemy to receive 25% more damage. If the enemy loses line of sight from Zen for more than 2 seconds, the orb will detach. This was kind of covered before, but really simply, orb targets who are aggressive and orb targets who your team are aggressing on.
This Ash is hyper aggressive. This Ramattra is super defensive. So who do you think is more likely to die from discord?
Ash.
Right, and even if you don't kill her, getting discorded is a, hey, watch out, you know what I'm saying? And this person needs to be, hey, watched out, because if she does it, she's going to kill your team, right? So a discord should be often the person that you're shooting, because that's somebody that you need to be putting your attention onto, otherwise they'll kill you or your team. So right now, let's get that Harmony Orb on either Ramattra or Symmetra, because they're both the most aggressive. Let's get the Discord Orb on the enemy Ashe, because she's the most aggressive.
Now, in Brig Zen, and in terms of the bigger picture, you can use orbs to control any section of the map. Here's the example on Basan Sanctuary that I commonly refer to, where you orb both tracers and control that coast side area of the map. Don't just orb the enemy tank, especially if they're sitting on point and aren't even aggressing or are being aggressed on in the first place. Zen's second ability does literally no healing, has the same mechanics as the Discord Orb, but deals 30 healing per second on a singular target. The exact same logic that I went through with Discord also applies to your Harmony Orb. Orb aggression. It's better to put Harmony on a teammate who's about to take a lot of aggression rather than using Harmony on a teammate who's low but in relative safety. Try and use your orbs to control those flanks and orb your flankers, since 60 or so healing on a Tracer is going to mean a lot more than 60 or so healing on a Reinhardt. Zen's ultimate, Invincible, grants Zen invulnerability, a doubled movement speed, and makes Zen deal 300 healing per second for 6 seconds to anyone who is standing within the radius. First off, really simple, but needs to be said. Please use your orbs before Transcendence, especially if you're looking to go really aggressive on a singular target. If that target doesn't have Discord, they could very well survive. Now onto the usage. The most obvious one is to save Transcendence for defensive ults like Grav, Flux, Dragon Blade, etc. Do note that you don't want to just ult because there's a Grav or Flux. Assess the situation, look if anyone's going to need the extra healing to survive, then you can trans. You'd be surprised to see how many Zen players pop trans just because they hear Genji pull blades. There's also going to be moments where you just might need to use trans defensively, even if there are no big scary ultimates like Flux or Grav. If the Reinhardt, Ramatra or Orisa are just a bit too aggressive when they go in, you need to be ready to pop trans. The key to not using translate is anticipation. Your Orisa spear spinning into the backline, a Ramatra walking in with Nemesis form might provoke you to think about using trans. Linking onto that theme of anticipation, there's using your trans against EMP. Before, you'd have to hide against her since you'd be dropped to 50 HP and fully hacked. Now that's no longer the case. However, if you're playing up against a full dive composition, or one that can burst down a singular target very quickly, hiding against EMP isn't a bad idea. Lastly, there's aggressive uses of your Transcendence. This will likely be done when there's no ults you need to save trans for, and you want to buy a 6-second window for your team to push in aggressively. Maybe you're stuck at a choke and need to push through, or maybe that tank needs to be shot down. Your trans can greatly help with that. Now onto the positional section of the guides. This is one of the most important areas with Zen because of how immobile you are. The same rules I had in my Ana guide also apply to you, but even more so because you haven't got any defensive abilities like nade or sleep darts. I'll use this example in Kings or Thirds. First off, you need to have a corner or cover. Because of how large your hitbox is, you need to have cover to where you can stop taking damage at any time whilst you're poking.
Cover. Yep.
I was using this little skinny wall. I don't know why it's doing so.
Oh my gosh, you literally survived because you played cover, and then you got greedy and then left the cover and died for it.
Right.
Secondly, you need to have good line of sight to where you can see both teams. This isn't just so you can do damage and help your team, but also your team can help you. This will also help your awareness because, as I get onto, you can see and deal with flankers like a Tracer flanking through the Mega. Thirdly, you need good distance from angles, just meaning that you need some distance between you and the flanker that's going onto you in order to have enough time to react and land some damage.
I want you to anticipate and deny the enemy dive. So like right now, you're very intense on burning what's happening over here, and I appreciate the Discord and some of the shots, but at some point you need to have that internal timer or that awareness of the enemy dive tanks or Tracer or whatever. This is their window where they're going to be doing something. I remember when Alarm was like in contenders, and one of the things that Tracers would always say that made Alarm great wasn't just his mechanics, but he seemed to always know the timing of when that flank was coming. Like he always had that right click ready to the launch, and and he wouldn't always get the kill necessarily, but you'd force the blinks, he'd hit one shot and force the recall early, and it just scuffed things up.
And lastly, you need rotation options. This means that you have places to move throughout the fight in order to keep up with your team and also to pressure the enemy team from different angles. Here's an old but gold example of Jane going through a Master Zen on Rialto, showing a perfect rotation to the left.
Okay,
Left flank.
Yeah, good, you got it.
Is that really that hard? Soft flank, left side, found an opportunity, unscouted, surprised the Hanzo, had a right click charge, boom. Now, you can either look for a follow up, try and deny the res, or just fuck off. You need to do that shit consistently. You want to get to the point where the opponent is fearful of what window, doorway, crevice, just fucking attic your robot ass is going to float out of and just delete somebody with a right click.
The key thing with rotations is the timing. You want to be timing when you move with when your team, specifically your tank, is drawing attention. That can be your Reinhardt pushing in, Orisa spear spinning in, Winston jumping, ball rolling, or Doom punching in.
Now, Sigma can beat the absolute living crap out of Zenyatta. However, he's timing this at a point in time where Space has committed shield and is distracted on an off angle. At the same time, he takes this position here. This is a window of opportunity to watch Space's HP. Bang, 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 bang. Space has to give up space. Get it? And there's no risk from Finn, or very little risk from Finn at that point in time.
It's why, in that Jane clip, that flank worked, because the Zen's Reinhardt was drawing attention away from the front line. And before I end off this section, there's been a solid pretense throughout the video when playing Zen against flankers. But what if you're not playing against any flankers at all? Here's Barlow explaining just how aggressive you can be when you're playing up against a brawl composition with limited mobility and range.
Team Blue doesn't have any mobile dive threats that would punish their supports for being isolated, so it's actually very safe for Ana Zen to be isolated versus Team Blue's composition if they're with a flanker. I would like Luke to be rotating all far here with ball and holding this angle here, maybe even like back here, right? To where it's a lot, yes, there's a little bit of isolation, but nothing on Team Blue is able to punish that isolation fast enough.
Now onto Zen's backline synergies. Zen Kiriko, honestly, quite underrated. Kiriko can flank and TP back to you if you need peeling, whilst also having enough healing to take care of your only tank. If both players are competent and you play some distance, there shouldn't be too much to dislike here. Zen Lucio. Run by Coach No-Hill on the LA Valiant last year, Zen Lucio's lack of healing is, in theory, made up for it by their utility. 2 defensive ultimates, speed and discord, as well as respectable damage. Move fluidly with your Lucio, so he's able to peel flankers off you, though you may have a hard time healing your tank, as well as dealing with a coordinated dive. Also, don't stack your trans with beats. Zen Moira. On paper, a good combo. They both make up for areas they lack in, with that being utility on Moira's end, and that being sustain on Zen's end. But because Moira is one of the worst pure supports in the game, a single dive hero can tear apart a composition built on Moira Zen. Zen Bap or Zen Mercy, comboing these two together because they're both glass cannons of a support duo and are mainly played on the same long range maps, Soccer Real or Junkertown. Great poke and utility, just look to keep the distance on maps where you typically wouldn't play this, especially up against Orisa, Ryan and Ramatra, who will run you over if you get too close. Zen Brig. Where Zen Brig lacks in range compared to Zen Mercy or Zen Bap, it makes up for it in sustain. Brig's repair pack buff makes her the ultimate pure support, just ensure both of you rotate together. Always watch and look out for flankers. Zen Ana, kind of like a more rounded out version of Zen Bap or Zen Mercy. Nade, Sleep and Discord are powerful pieces of utility, so make sure, especially when you're not up against dive comps, you're utilising angles to get the most out of your abilities. Well, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.